Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is News and Week in Review. We're going to be diving into a few assorted news pieces, a topic of the week, the games I played, the week in review, all the usual things you've come to know, love, and expect, unless, of course, you stumbled onto this video for the very first time ever, in which case it's an odd choice for a first video to watch on the channel. There's like a bunch of other great ones I'd highly recommend, ways to manage your collection, crowdfunding roundups, there's a review of The Witcher Old World I'd recommend, so I like The Witcher Old World a lot, I still need to review the expansions. There's other things I'd recommend starting with, but if you insist on starting with this video, welcome aboard and let's dive into it. Starting off with over on Gamefound, we have the Gamefound Feast. Disclaimer as usual, I do work for Gamefound, but the Gamefound Feast is a once every 3 or 4 months event where we take a bunch of campaigns that are, coming up on the platform and just, showcase those campaigns. It's not all campaigns. There are many more campaigns that do not show up in the feast. But we just take some, things that might be of more interest to you. To that end, we have over here Dungeons and Lasers over here coming to you from Arkham Studios. We have Keyforge Grim Reminders, the next set of Keyforge, which makes me realize very strongly that I'm not into Keyforge enough to keep up with this. I went ahead and bought a bunch of stuff for Keyforge Winds of Exchange. Haven't played it yet, so I don't think I'm a Keyforge person yet. Lorcana's to be decided. We have Earthburn Rangers is going to be launching over on Gamefound as well. We have March and Wallace Steam Power. Very intrigued what that one is. March and Wallace has a bunch of games in this kind of train game series. I'm curious where Steam Power fits in terms of, we have Age of Steam, we have Steam, and we have Railways of the World. And now we have Steam Power as well. I don't know if it's at all the same or different or anything. We have Perseverance Castaway Chronicles. That's going to be launching as well as Secrets of the Lost Tomb is coming back after a decade later. Those are going to be some of the things that are launching in the Gamefound Feast. So a bunch of, high priority games to talk about. We'll be having other announcements on the platform soon as well. Then we have over here, this is over game stores are squandering their early access to Lorcana. This is actually a very fun article. I was having a conversation with a friend about how badly some game stores are managing their Lorcana, and then he sent me this article as a response, which was basically all the stuff I was talking to him about. And effectively, right now, game stores are... should I do a full video on this? I might do a full video on this. I might do a full video on this subject, but right now, game stores are effectively... Not all game stores. Some game stores are charging more for early access to Lorcana pricing. Basically, the first time to get Lorcana was at Gencon. But then after that, 2 weeks later, game stores had access to it, and game stores have exclusive access. Hobbyist game stores have exclusive access for 2 weeks before the big box stores get access. That's basically Ravensburger saying, hey, we want to promote the hobby, we want to, help develop the game stores and the people in the hobby, and so we're going to go ahead and give you early access. And then some, not all, game stores are like doubling or tripling their pricing of what the games should be, or they're upcharging. Let's say upcharging. I don't know to what extent, but they are upcharging well over MSRP to get access to it based on the fact that there's a limited supply, and there is a limited supply. The problem with that is when a game store upcharges based on supply and demand and not based on a pricing structure, they are effectively shooting themselves in the foot. Because the only leg, game stores traditionally have... I really should do a full video on this. Game stores traditionally have only one really strong argument as to why you should pay more for their games as opposed to going online and buying at the lowest available price. Because game stores usually cost more. If you want to buy a $59 MSRP game online, it might cost you $42. At your game store, it might cost you $59. So why are you paying more for your game store's copy? Why not just buy it online with free shipping half the time, or you bundle up to $100, get free shipping? Why not just go online and buy it? And the reason is because game stores are a beacon of the hobby. They help support the hobby. They are here to help grow it. They are here to help what's the word for it? There's a word for trees and fostering. I don't know, whatever it is. They help grow, and there's a word, it's bothering me. But either way, they help grow the hobby. That's what they do. The problem is when a game store sits there and says, hey, we're going to charge market price for a thing, and by the way, the argument to charge market price, I am fine with. I am completely fine with the argument to charge market price, except for 2 caveats to it. There's 2 caveats. The first caveat is the fact that Ravensburger gave them early access. Ideally, Ravensburger's intent was to help them out by giving them early sales and distribution, not by giving them, hey, it's kind of like when people go to Target and they buy something, when the people go to Target and buy Jaws of the Lion to sell it at a markup, that's someone operating against Target's, I guess, ideal preferred interests. They are walking in without getting specific access to that thing. Ravensburger gave specific early access to game stores, and they are squandering that early access, as the title says over here. So the first is that it's not really in the spirit of what Ravensburger's intent was. The second argument is that the problem is, as soon as you go with market pricing, as soon as you sit there and say, we are charging market pricing because that's what the market demands, well then where in the world are you the rest of the time? Where are you charging market price the rest of the time? Because the rest of the time you're overcharging. So if you want to go with the argument that, well, we're just charging what the market charges, great. Everyone should go ahead and buy that $42 game online instead of spending $60 at your store, because they're just going with what the market demands. Game stores do not price their stores, they do not price their stock based on what the market demands. They price their stock based on a variety of other factors. So to use this one point in time as an instance of when they're going to go by the market, you lose all the goodwill you could possibly imagine with your customers. I'm not saying you should not support local game stores. I am saying that if your local game store overcharged on a product to go by market rates, hold that to them the rest of the time. Genuinely, there's no reason not to. There's no reason not to. So I think game stores that are charging more for Lorcana really doing themselves a disservice in the long run. I don't think it was a good idea. Moving on. Anyways, moving on to it, we have Ludus Magnus Studios over here. Ludus Magnus Studios, they have Haunted Lands coming out as their next game. Looks very different than the usual stuff. Very intrigued by this one. Looks like an LMS Lite kind of thing, but it doesn't say LMS Lite, so I'm not sure. We have Flat River Group. This is an interesting one. Speaking of pricing, Flat River Group dropped drops the SRP on multiple games. Basically, Flat River Group's a large distribution company. They have things like, Greater Than Games underneath them, as well as a lot of other games underneath them, a lot of companies underneath them. But they, Synapsis Games, dozens of companies. Either way, they effectively dropped the SRP, the MSRP on games. They're saying, hey, we're lowering pricing on games based on, as things shift back to normal, we believe that some of the prices that we've raised in the pandemic can afford to be lowered, and it makes sense. And so they're lowering the MSRP on a variety of games. That's something that I personally haven't seen done before. I find that very fun and very cool that they're lowering SRPs. I am curious how much of it is based on, like, for instance, the first one they mentioned is Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice. I wonder how much of it is, that's dropping from 139 to 79. So, how much of this is based on demand and supply of certain games versus how much of it is based on, the market adjusting, because that's nearly half the price. Is that being done across the board? So I'm curious about the motivations, but nonetheless happy to see an SRP being dropped. Then we have over here something I didn't talk about recently. We had Farms Race. Farms Race had an IP dispute. Forgot to talk about it. A disclaimer, we did paid content for them. We did a paid gameplay for Farms Race. But they had an IP dispute where effectively they were trying to give this military drone, which utilized the same symbols from Wingspan. So it was parody, but parody with the use of the same iconography and symbols, which I believe, I'm not a parody lawyer, I believe parody has limitations to what you can do, and by using their symbols and iconography, that might have been the line that makes them a victim to basically being slapped down. And slapped down they were. So they I believe, this is based on what I so far followed about this, I believe they reached out and tried starting a conversation. I think Stonemaier Games reached out to them to start a conversation. They didn't engage, and so they stopped them with a, hey, Kickstarter IP dispute, at which point the campaign just went offline for a week until they were able to get it back up and running, without the parody pack at the end of it. So just a bit of news as far as things going on in parody, IP, and Kickstarter. Then we have $300,000 worth of stolen Magic the Gathering cards recovered. I'm very curious to see what will happen with the 2 people involved in the theft, where I spent 2 weeks ago. I decided to encourage thieving, just not on a high level. It wasn't really the intent of what I was trying to say, but it happened to an extent. I'm a good person. I'm telling you, I really am. Anyways, the $300,000 worth of stolen Magic the Gathering cards has been recovered, so that's a good thing. I wasn't sure what would happen there, and we'll see what happens next as far as the 2 people of interest and what happens with them. I'm very intrigued. I don't wish ill will towards anyone at all, ever, no matter what they've ever done. I'm not wishing for someone else's pain and suffering and hurt. The flip side of that conversation is I do believe in cause and effect, and I do believe that when people do bad things without a degree of consequence to those actions, it's not good for society in general. So I am curious to see what will happen in this instance. Moving on, we have Unconscious Mind. This is small, a little bit just a reminder that Unconscious Mind, the pledge manager, closes in 10 days-ish, something like that. Maybe it's 7 days by the time you watch this, or 5 days. If you're really late to the show, maybe it's 2 days. Maybe you found this video 2 years in the future and you just bought Unconscious Mind, it's on your table and you're enjoying it, in which case, why are you watching a week in review from 2 years ago? What about the YouTube algorithm thought that was a good idea for you? Or did you intentionally search for this? Or did you just steal $300,000 worth of Magic the Gathering cards and you're searching what the best way to get away with it is, and this video popped up in your feed? I am curious, but whatever it is, if you are watching this video 2 years from now, leave a comment down below. I'll reply to it. For all you people who think it's funny to leave that comment now, it's obviously not 2 years in the future, and I won't reply to those. Maybe I will. Moving on over here, we have Chip Theory Games. Chip Theory Games, they have the mechs, metal mechs. What is this? I don't know what this is, but it looks, that didn't work. That picture didn't work. No, the picture didn't work. I'm going back. We're going back. We'll just go ahead and zoom in over here. We have Metal Mechs from Chip Theory Games, clearly. And they just dropped this picture on their page. So what does this mean? It means what we all knew was going to happen, which is they were always going to have, not always, but like once they did Metal Mechs for Burn Cycle, there's a decent chance that we were going to see Metal Mechs for Chip Theory Games. And I'm intrigued by this, so ultimately we shall see. And with that, we're going to go to our topic of the week, which is rating the media events at Gen Con 2023. This is an interesting article that I read on Board Game Geek from Eric Martin. What's the W for? Eric Martin, I think. I don't know the W. WEM, something Eric Martin, Board Game Geek, who does all the news pieces there, had a very interesting video about the media events at Gen Con, which I had my own thoughts on, which mostly, well, let's get into it. So let's talk about what his video was. And this is just the topic of the week. It's an interesting one because, again, once again a conversation around the nature of publishers, of audience, of influencers, of the way all these circles tend to work, and the pros, the cons, the downsides, all of that stuff. Effectively, the video goes through rating how effective he felt the various media events were at Gen Con for his goals. His goals being to learn about a game so he can talk about that game to his audience, to be able to write about the game and give you the information and the news. He's coming there for news so he can transcribe and convey that news to the various readers on Board Game Geek. That's his goal, which makes sense. And so he's talking about from the stance of, okay, great, well, I signed up for a variety of press events, and some of them were great and gave me what I wanted, and some of them were not great and did not give me what I wanted. And he goes through ranking them. He starts off by ranking like the best like 4 or 5 or whatnot. Then he kind of refuses to drop names about other media events, although I have my suspicions which ones are which, just having attended a decent amount of the media events at Gen Con. I have a decent suspicion which ones he's referring to when he doesn't drop names. And then he ended up by talking about, the worst one and dropping the name there of Ravensburger and Lorcana. And worst not being a bad event, but a bad event as per his goals, what he's trying to get out of the event, which is news. The overall point of the entire video, and I highly recommend watching it. I think several things. I think that there are areas I agree with him, which we'll talk about shortly. There are areas that I disagree with him on a personal level, but not at all on a professional level. On a professional level, I think his viewpoint is the best one there. I happen to appreciate some of the things as well, with caveats and disclaimers we'll get to shortly. But on a professional level, I walked away from that video having nothing but more respect for Eric Martin, the way he approaches the industry, with the possible exception of him having to tear up a $200 card to prove a point. I'm not against that. I understand why he did it, but it still feels wasteful. But I understand the point, and I think the point has some merit, even though it's like Anyways, so the point and the goal of the video was severalfold. First of all, better communication between publishers and media. I think that is huge, absolutely huge. Something that I walked away from Gen Con this year myself with, both in terms of media events that I went to, as well as in terms of direct publisher meetings. Better communication about the expectations of what that meeting or event is for was a huge takeaway for me from Gen Con. Because I also went to several meetings, and some of them, so again, meetings and events, and some of them I got what I wanted to out of that meeting or event, and others I did not. And I mean, Gen Con, frankly, is some of the best 4 days in gaming, or it's the best 4 days in gaming if you listen to the pitch. And if it's the best 4 days in gaming, then both personally and professionally, I want to enjoy myself there. And so wasting time on a meeting or event that doesn't give me what I want out of it is a waste of time. It's not for me. And so for me, my biggest goal that I walked away from, that aligns to an extent with some of his goals, but not exclusively aligns, is the idea of better communication. If you're going to have a meeting with a publisher, if insert publisher name says, hey, we'd love to meet with you for 25 minutes, whatever it is, half an hour, it's usually half an hour, no one says 25 minutes, I don't know why I said that. If a publisher says that to you, next year I want to go into that saying, being like, hey, I would love to set aside time, can we talk about what the goals of this meeting are? Like, what games are we planning on covering or talking about? What's the goals? I'd like to see the goals. Because I would say most of the meetings or events that I went to at Gen Con, I got something out of. Either information about games, or a degree of networking, or a degree of fun. All of those things have value to me. This is where I might disagree with Eric, not on a professional level, but on a personal level. If I go to a meeting or event that is fun, I do benefit from that and enjoy that. And you're like, well, of course you benefit from that. That's the problem. I acknowledge that. Going to an event that is purely fun. Some of the events were purely fun-based. One of the events he refers to was a bar where they had a publisher was like, hey, we're doing an event. And then it was nothing to do with any of their games. It was just having people over at a bar, giving them drink tickets, having a stand-up comedian, and that was the event. I didn't love that event. It's not my go-to or preferred. I have specific things that I like in an event, and I'll talk more about those things as well. But that was not my favorite event, not by a long shot. I very much enjoy the social nature of this space. I love the social nature of the space. I love making friends in the industry, both fellow content creators as well as publishers. Not because I'm trying to make friends with the publisher, but because I like friends. I like connections. I value connections. And yes, there are conflict of interest issues when you are friends with the person whose games you're covering. That is completely true. But just on a selfish personal level, I like being friendly with people. And so I do enjoy the social nature of events, but I do agree that I like to know what I'm signing up for, and just going to an event that's at a bar, which is not my jam, where there's a comedian who, honestly, the comedian I like his stuff. I do think the comedian is funny, but that wasn't my preferred event either. And I wish I would have known what the goal of the event was, because I found out over the course of Gencon that just signing up for events was drastically different experiences. Drastically. One of the events he mentions is Renegade Games. I almost didn't go to the Renegade Games meeting because I went to another press event first that I thought was not a waste of time. I don't want to use the word waste of time, but where it was purely social based. There was food, there was drinks, there was social stuff, there was no gaming happening at all. And that event, as a social event, I hung out for 40 minutes, talked to a few of my friends, I enjoyed myself, but I could hang out with my friends in any way, shape, or form that I didn't get what I wanted out of that event. I didn't have a problem with it, but I didn't get what I wanted out of the event. Again, to some extent I align with Eric Martin. I just think I have a less extreme is the wrong terminology, because I think his approach is correct. I am less bothered by some of the meetings or events that aren't as helpful. But so I went to that first event, and then again, I'm pretty sure I know which one he's talking about. He references about, like, an event that had no gluten-free food, the games were set up, but no one was really doing anything with them. Yeah, I kind of walked into it, had a good time for 25 minutes talking to my friends, and then left. And I almost didn't go to the Renegade event because I was like, oh, is this what the events are going to be? Like, is this what I'm going to get out of these press events? And I almost didn't go to Renegade. And I'm very happy I did, because Renegade, and this is where Eric Martin mentions he didn't really go to the event, and so he didn't go to the event at the beginning of it. He came at the end, and it's kind of almost over. And that's another interesting part, because again, this goes back to the sense of communication, because it was not clear, based on any invite, which press events you wanted to be there when it started because of the full presentation, and which ones you could wander in and there'd be games set up on the table. The very first event I went to was an Asmodee room, which again, Eric Martin mentions that one. That was a fun event. It was informational. There were games set up. There were people talking about the games. It was a good event. It wasn't necessarily my favorite event, but it was a good event. Renegade Games was one of my, I guess, favorites in terms of information conveyed. It was one of my favorite events there. And so the Renegade event was very good, and I almost didn't go to it all. Unfortunately, I went to it and it had great information. It had slideshows, presentations, information, transparency, everything. I don't know why I said transparency. I just mean conveyance of information. It was really, really, really well done, and I liked that event a lot. But I had no idea one's going to be an hour-long, direct scheduled event with information being started from the beginning. The other's like, hey, walk in at any point and talk to people and have fun. And that information was missing. That information wasn't conveyed. And my primary goal, personally, and again, we'll all have different goals. There will be people who are like, well, you should never have a social meet and greet. You should not have anything fun. It should be purely informational. I respect that viewpoint, genuinely. I don't share it, but I respect it. I understand where it comes from, and I don't disagree that there's reasons for that argument. But on my end, my goal is more informational. I want to know what I'm signing up for as I go to an event before I go to that event. One of the events he did talk about was Lorcana. And Lorcana is very interesting because I understand he did not like the Lorcana event at all. He just didn't like the Lorcana event. He's like, there's no information about the games. They had a trading card thing going on. They gave you a bunch of swag or whatnot. That's not what I'm here for. And you're not even get a fully playable game. You get a single box and whatnot and all of that. So first of all, it helps if you're hanging out with a bunch of friends, because then you have multiple decks and you could play a game. I still understand his complaint, but I went with a bunch of friends and was able to sit there and play Lorcana. And so I was able to enjoy and actually play and engage the game. If you were actually at the event, by the way, there were games of Lorcana. There were tables set up and the games of Lorcana were happening. So I still understand his critiques and complaints, but I think that, that information, for example, about the fact that there were games of Lorcana happening. People were playing Lorcana at the event. And so content creators were playing Lorcana. That's a good goal, and that I think is a good takeaway from these things. And they're also engaging with the trading nature and the deck building, which I didn't want to do. I just didn't want to do that, so I didn't care. But yeah, so I think that there were merits there. I also have a different viewpoint of that event because I spent about 45 minutes, talking with Ravensburger about their games, about their plans, about those things. I did walk away. I talked with Ryan Miller, the co-designer of Lorcana. So I did walk away with information about Lorcana and about their plans and their approach and what they hope for the industry. I did walk away more informed about Lorcana. So I think part of it could be, and I do agree though, I do agree it would have been easy to go to that party. This is actually interesting. It's not really a critique against Eric Martin, it's just a interesting conversation about the nature of these events or parties or whatever. Because both he and I went to the Lorcana event and the event that they had a comedian, which I'm honoring his not using the name of that event. And in both those events, I could see someone having the same takeaway, which he seemed to have the same takeaway, or I could see someone having different takeaways, because I kind of ended up talking with key people at Ravensburger at the Lorcana event, and so I walked away feeling more informed and feeling like I got something out of it. Whereas the other event, I didn't, and so I walked away feeling I got nothing out of it. Okay, not nothing. I had fun with friends for a few minutes, but I got less out of it. But that's just the nature of who you ended up talking to. You could have gone to the comedian event and talked to the people at the company and gotten more information. So the nature of building relationships through schmoozing, through talking, through having a conversation, it's an interesting conversation about the nature of the industry, of how this goes. And again, I completely respect the whole aspect of, well, it's not supposed to be about building relationships. It should be about, just getting information so you can talk about. I get all of that. I genuinely do. My main takeaway, again, for both meetings and events, was understanding what they are and having a better sense of their goals. And that's something that next year, at Gencon next year, or at any other event I go to in the future, I plan on questioning what those things are. I don't mind schmoozing. I don't mind having a good time. I like fun. I like fun. But when I go to a press event, I'm usually expecting something different. Again, the Lorcana event's a good example. Like, because of how these events went, even the Lorcana event, I only showed up in the last, half an hour, maybe? No, there's more than that, because I talked for 45 minutes. I probably showed up in the last hour, I guess. It was a 3-hour event. I showed up in the last hour because I was like, whatever. I'm not here to go to all these parties. I'm here. I don't have a problem with the parties. I'm just not here. I'm trying to get something out of it. I'm trying to get a lot out of Gen Con. So yeah, I thought his video, rating media events, was incredibly valuable. It mirrors some of my thoughts, not all of my thoughts. Again, we are aligned on some aspects. The biggest one we align on is communication and expectations. That's the biggest thing. Like the Renegade Games event, even though it was a great event, it was not conveyed that, hey, show up at the beginning or you're missing the whole presentation. That's not conveyed, and so you see these 3-hour blocks of time and you're like, okay, I'll show up whenever because it's a demo room or something like that. And so really, I want to walk into next year's events being like, what is the goal of each of these things? What is the goal? What's this meeting? Should I show up on time? Can I show up whenever? How does this play out? What am I missing if I don't do it? Can I get that information from you? This is a good question to ask. And this, I guess, is more relevant to content creators. But a good question to ask is almost just directly asking, hey, if I'm not able to make this event, what's the best way for me to get this information from you? Because if they're like, what information? Well, then it's pretty clear that it's a party at that point, as opposed to if they're like, oh yeah, we'd love to talk about our releases and we can schedule a post-Zoom follow-up call after Gen Con. That would be a very different conversation. So I want to figure out what the goal of these things are. I understand the complaints around any form of partying or swag, any of those stuff, and there's less swag than you think. I think the Lorcana party was the only one that had swag, past drink tickets and all that stuff, which apparently Eric lost a lot of his drink tickets, which I just find amusing. But anyways, that's it. I think it's a good video to watch. I highly encourage you watching the rating media events video. I'll try to link to it down below. I think it's informative. I think it's educational. If you are a publisher, I think there's a lot of things to take away from it. If you are a content creator, I think understanding what your goals are for events and meetings is a good focus to have as you go through conventions. And I think if you're a regular viewer if you're just a consumer of board games, it's also good to just understand what the industry is like. The industry does have a degree of whining and dining. It's not to any insane degree, but yes, if you have a party with drink tickets and, food, and there's nothing informative going on, at that point it's just about the whining and dining, which is present. I don't think it comes out of a sense of malice. I think it comes, one thing Eric talked about is that sometimes he'll get things, he'll get a holiday bag where you get a cup or a mug from something, and he's like, why? I'm not going to talk about that. Why am I getting that? And he kind of loosely touches upon, well, maybe it's a sense of appreciation for the fact that I've talked about things in the past. I think that's reasonable. I think appreciation does go hand in hand with influence, and it doesn't have to come from malice. It comes from, hey, we like you, we want you to like us, you've covered our games, let's have a relationship. And again, those walls are tricky. Those walls are tricky, because having all the walls in place, I respect that. Also, on a separate note, I don't really get things. I don't get those. I've gotten holiday things in the past. I don't know if I've ever kept anything from them, just because they're not usually, maybe a mug. I'd have to go look. I'm not sure. Either way, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the games I played. The games I played, as usual, this is a smattering of games from the games I've actually played this past week. And in particular, we're going to talk about 3 games. Fuji Flush, which I had a chance to play in an airport with a bunch of friends. And we just played Fuji Flush, like 2 rounds of Fuji Flush, going through it. First time playing it from Freedom Feast. It's fun. It's not amazing. I don't know if I'd seek it out, but I'd happily play it. You just have a bunch of cards, and what you're doing is you're playing cards trying to either add to their value as you go around, or trying to like flush out the previous values by playing a higher value. And when you flush out a value, players draw new cards, but when you eventually, if it makes its way back to you and you haven't gotten rid of your cards, if they haven't been flushed, then you get to go ahead and get rid of a card effectively. And so then you slowly trying to reduce your hands down to 0 through this process. It's fun, it's easy, it's simple. I don't know if there's a high degree of strategy. I do think there is a high degree of luck. Ultimately, it's just having a good time. It's more of a party game than a strategy game to me. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't turn it down. Don't think I'd ever request it. Then we have Captain Sonar. Captain Sonar, on the other hand, I really enjoyed that one. First time, I've always wanted to play Captain Sonar. It's always been a goal of mine to play it. It's a hard game to play. You really want to play it with 8 players. And I finally had a chance to play it. We talked about this briefly on our weekly live. Devin, Meg, Jenna, and myself, we talked about it. We all were involved in that game, as well as, well, obviously 4 other people. And Captain Sonar was a very interesting and unique experience. The idea of trying to work together to control, how your sub moves, how it operates. You're in teams of 4, so you have a captain who's moving the ship around and who's launching various weapons and mines and sonar and drones and all that stuff. Then you have the people who are prepping those weapons, mines, sonars, and drones, the torpedoes. You have somebody else who's trying to manage the engines and ensure that your ship can move around the board and that your weapon systems are operational and you can move left when you want to move left or west when you want to move west. And then you also have the person who's the radio operator who's trying to track your opponent's subs, because you can listen in. You can listen into your opposing captain. So as the captain goes, move north. Okay, we can move north, yes. Move east, move west. You have the sonar person trying to track that and slowly tracking their pathway until you can figure out where they are. The radio operator trying to track that. And it's a fascinating game, a very interesting experience, one that I definitely want to have again, but I need to play it more. The problem is I kind of want to review the game, but I played it once. And this is a game you need to play more than once to review it, but it's such a hard game to table. So maybe I'll just do a first impressions at some point. I don't even have the game right now. Maybe I'll try to get a second play in one day and then do a first impressions. It's hard to call it a review. If I get in a bunch of plays, I'll call it a review, but if I get in 2 plays, I might just call it a first impressions. We'll see. But either way, that's going to be Captain Sonar. Then the last one is going to be Tiger and Dragon. Tiger and Dragon is one of the new ones from, I think it's the same people who did Scout, if I'm not mistaken. Is it Oink Games? Is it Oink? I think it's Oink Games. But Tiger and Dragon I was very excited for, and then I was very disappointed by. I thought Tiger and Dragon was fine. In the game, where you're basically engaging these little mini battles. You're like, I'll play a 5, and then someone else is like, well, it goes round and around the table, almost like Fuji Flush. There's actually elements of Fuji Flush and Tiger and Dragon. But effectively, you play a number, and then that number is either defended against or not. And if you defend, you can play the next number. And it's all about getting rid of your tiles. But you know the exact pool of tiles in the game, which means you're trying to predict out how things will go. And there's different battle cards that reward you for different tiles left in your hand, and you're scoring for it. We played it maybe 3-4 times, and I don't think I got a sense of strong strategy from it. I just got a sense of that it's trying to appear strategic, but ultimately it comes down to the tiles you got. And I'm sure, again, as always with any game, I'm sure someone who dives into it can pick apart where that nuances of strategy are and really run away with a game. I didn't get a strong sense of control out of it, and I didn't even get the fast, simple fun of Fuji Flush. I'd rather play Fuji Flush over Tiger and Dragon. Tiger and Dragon, I think I would actively try to avoid at this point. The first 2 games weren't that bad because they ended kind of quickly, and the third game was a drag as everyone slowly got up points and just slowed down, and so Tiger and Dragon, not for me, sadly. Don't expect to see a review on the channel. I mean, honestly, I should review it. I played it. I just don't have a copy. If I get a copy, maybe I'll review it. But my general rule is, if I play a game once that I don't like, I'm not going to waste my time trying to track down a review. But I actually played it 4 times and didn't like it, so I'm fine reviewing it. I just don't have a copy. Anyways, that is, consider this your review unless you ever see one in the future. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into the week in review. The week in review starting off with this past Saturday where I reviewed My City. Meg and I reviewed My City, going through the game, talking about our experience with it. Overall, really enjoy that one. My City is just consistently fun. It is my most played game of all time, but it's still not my best game of all time. It's a 4 out of 5 for me. I enjoy it. I like it. I'm looking forward to My Island, which is up here. I want to play My Island already. But My City, just an overall good time. And yeah, definitely enjoy that one. Then later on Saturday, I had a review for Spellbook. Spellbook, I gave a 3.5 out of 5. It did some things that I really enjoyed, but ultimately I found that the game itself was too narrow in how much it does that I was limited in how much I enjoyed it as well. Spellbook is actively, this happens several times a year where I'll review a game and I'll play a game and then I'll be like, I want an expansion. I want an expansion now. It's not that, sometimes I have a game I don't know, DEI. I love DEI and I have 5 expansions and I don't feel the need to play them. I'll play them eventually, but I just don't feel the need. Versus something like Spellbook Spellbook, I actively want an expansion. I think an expansion will make it a better experience for me, because depending on what the expansion does. But you basically have these different spells you can combine. My biggest issue was the game space wasn't wide enough for the spells to be interesting enough over multiple plays. Like, I played it a bunch of times, I got what I need out of it, and then I'm like ready to move on for it, but I kind of want an expansion. So I like it. I do like Spellbook. It's just at a 3.5 out of 5, it's not going to stay against other games that are 4s, 4.5s, and 5s. Then we have Sunday we had a video about first-person shooters, the nature of first-person shooters in the board game space. There was also supposed to be an interview about Lorcana, but that didn't happen because I was traveling and forgot to do the dates right. But anyways, first-person shooters in the board game space. I had a conversation talking about first-person shooters, where they are, where they have been, how they've done, how they haven't been received as well. People completely and fairly pointed out that I forgot to talk about Deep Rock Galactic and Sniper Elite the board game, 2 other first-person shooters that I completely forgot, embarrassingly so. I thought I knew crowdfunding. They weren't on my radar, but yeah, I mean, I knew about those games, I just forgot to talk about them. But either way, it was a conversation around first-person shooters and why they haven't typically landed as well. Although, again, Deep Rock Galactic would be an exception to that, so, it is what it is. I don't think Sniper Elite would be an exception. I don't think it did well enough. That's another one that kind of re-emphasizes that it has an audience, but not the audience. Then on Monday we had a video about 10 marketing tricks that actually work in crowdfunding. This is a video about marketing and crowdfunding, how they hook you, how they get you, just so you're informed. The goal of this video, as far as I'm concerned, is informing you, because marketing is happening. Marketing will happen, whether I do or don't like it. And sometimes I'm okay with it, sometimes I don't really consider it a problem, depending on the marketing trick at play. Other times I do consider it a problem, but everyone will have their own line in the sand. When do you feel lied to, manipulated, sold to? When is it just, hey, we're advertising the game, and when is it like, hey, we're going to obfuscate and hide information so that you get this game when you otherwise couldn't have or wouldn't have or shouldn't have any of those things? And so that nature of the video, my goal of the video was to inform, because everyone will have their own line. Like, I have things in that video that I'm not okay with and I wish were different. And I have things in the video that I couldn't care less at all. But everyone will have their own area that they draw their line, the things that they like or don't like. But I highly recommend you watch it, especially if you are going to be backing games. Then I highly recommend you watch it, because it's worth knowing how and where you're being sold to, manipulated. Just walking and knowing will make you better able to resist it, or at least less frustrated by it, and both of those are a win. Then on Tuesday we had a bunch of videos going up. We had a Galaxy Postman gameplay. This is a gameplay that Meg and I did. This is a paid gameplay, so pay attention to that. But a paid gameplay of Galaxy Postman for Hadawi Spiel, for their active Kickstarter. Later on Tuesday we had a Splendor Duel review. So review of Splendor Duel. I enjoyed the game. It's a 3.5 out of 5. Splendor, like, at first, when I first played Splendor Duel, I was like, I like this better than Splendor, and I still do. But the more I played it, the more I was like, it still feels like Splendor, and that means it's a good game for me, but not a great game for me. 3.5 out of 5 is leaving the collection. Then we have, well, spoiler, that will show up in a different video. Then lastly, on Tuesday, we had a Sky Team review. Love Sky Team so far. Currently a very strong game for me. It's a 4 to 5. I really enjoy it. I think it's high variability. I think there is a limit to how much the game really does, which is why it's like a 4 to 5 as opposed to higher. But I think it's a smooth, quick, cooperative game, easy to pull out, easy to play, and just a good time. Then on Wednesday we had a few things, as usual. We had 6 mini game reviews, games from Gencon. Basically, come back from Gencon, I've already played, I don't know, half or so. I probably played around half of the games that I came back in that 50 game pile, and some of those games are being dedicated reviews. So you've already seen Sky Team, you've seen Dixit Odyssey, Dixit Disney, you've seen Spellbook. So you already have seen some of these dedicated reviews, but some of them are just bundled up into like, hey, and this is the tricky part. Like, sometimes if you watch my reviews, you'll be like, why are there more like, 3.5s and 4s and less 3s and 2.5s? And the answer is because sometimes the 3s and 2.5s become a dedicated video. Other times I just don't care enough to share my lack of interest in a game, and they get shoved into a roundup video. This roundup video of six post-Gen Con games, if I recall correctly, 5 of them were 3 and 1 was a 3.5, which evens out those numbers. Or 1 was a 2.5 maybe? I don't think anywhere 2.5. I don't think anywhere bad enough. I have to like rewatch the video and think which ones were in there. But yeah, lots of times the more met I am in a game, the more likely it'll be in a roundup video, or possibly just never get a review entirely because I don't want to give it a second play. This is a constant problem within the board game space. It's not a problem on my channel, it's a problem on other channels. We want to play the things we enjoy. We want to spend less time with things we don't like. That's already accounting for the fact that there's already selection bias at play. Whenever you are trying to see which games are for you, you are picking games that ideally you have an interest in. So it is likely and probable that more of my reviews than not will be reviews that are in the higher echelons, the 3.5s to 5s, because I am self-selecting games that I think match my interest level. And so a game that doesn't match my interest level, it's like, okay, great. So now you're 3, maybe a 2.5. It happens, but it's definitely less frequent. And throwing 6 threes, throwing 5 threes into one video, that's definitely how that plays out. Then later on Wednesday, we had a weekly live. This is myself, Devin, Jenna, and Meg. Jenna is not officially part of the weekly live, but I mean, she's welcome. She has a 100% open invitation, so she's welcome whenever. I think she's joining next week as well. We're all friends. We have a good time together. So, but we covered a bunch of things. We had a game show. We talked about some of the games we played recently. All of us went to Ivy Games recently, followed by spending some time with friends. And we talked about the various games we played and the games we liked, including Captain Sonar, including Vindication, which is so freaking good. Vindication is so good. It's so good. It's so good. It's so good. Then from there we have. That was last night Wednesday. Last night Wednesday we had a review for 20 Strong, going over just basically 20 Strong. I played 20 Strong through all the various decks. I played through Solar Sentinels. I played through Chip Theory, Too Many Bones. I played through Hoplomachus. I've done all of them multiple times. I think by now I've done Solar Sentinels like 4 times, Hoplomachus maybe 4 times, and Too Many Bones I think 3 times. So a decent amount of plays in my belt of 20 Strong, and just talk about my notes and opinions of it where it is so far. I like the game so much that I sent Chip Theory games. I was like, here's my gameplay idea for how to make a burn cycle deck. And they're like, thank you for your suggestion. We're already working on a burn cycle deck. And I was like, fine. I like the concept of designing games. I enjoy the concept of designing and creating. I just don't like the work of execution. The work of execution, I'd rather play other people's designed games than my game that I have to play test and balance and tweak. That seems like so much work. So kudos to all the designers out there. I'd rather play games than design them. Then on Thursday we had upcoming crowdfunding games for September. A lot of games. September's going to be a happening month. We have Beast, we have Dragon Eclipse, we have Isofarian Guard, we have Terraforming Mars. We have so many games. The Final Girl Season 3, there's so many things launching in September. It's going to be a very happening and packed month. Good luck out there. Save your money wherever you can. I know there's several games that I'm interested in. Aberration, there's Rogue Angels. So many good games coming in September. So stay safe out there, everyone. Friday we had a few things. We had a review for Sea Salt and Pepper. Well, first we had a review for Neotopia, a game from Arcane Wonders and Meeble Games. I enjoyed Neotopia. I think that for me, Millefiori does it better. Neotopia is it's a solid game, enjoyable. Just Millefiori does it better. Later we had a review for Sea Salt and Pepper. That's from Pandasaurus Games. Again, I enjoy Sea Salt and Pepper. I don't think I like it as much as most people like it. I find it fun and simple and pull a card, do a card. It's kind of the same vein as games like Fuji Flush or Tiger and Dragon. Although I like it more than Tiger and Dragon. I like it more than Fiji Flush. I like it more than Fiji Flush. Like, Fiji Flush is probably a 3 out of 5. Tiger and Dragon is probably like a 2.5 out of 5 for me. Maybe even a 2. No, Tiger and Dragon is a 2 for me. I do not like Tiger and Dragon at all. Fiji Flush is a 3 for me. And Sea Salt and Pepper is a 3.5. I think I gave it a 3, actually. I think I gave it a 3. I have to double check the review, but I'm pretty sure I gave it a 3. It's not, like, I'm torn because the gameplay, this is why I'm on the fence. And this is why I hate it when I don't remember a rating, because one of the reasons, in fact, this is a little side tangent here. When people ask me, like, why don't you do, like, a 7.5 and an 8 and an 8.5 and a 9? Why don't you give more nuance to your ratings? My answer, which I just contradicted by my actions, my answer is always, if I can't remember what I rated a game, then that rating isn't an accurate reflection of the way I feel. Meaning, if I can't remember, if I have to be like, oh, was it a 7.5 or an 8? If I can't remember it, then that means I'm just putting a number on it. To me, the numbers have a meaning, and the meaning means I remember it. Each number I have, if you ever look at my description, there's a description that tells you what the number means. It's a meaning to me. And so, very often, the difference between a 3 and a 3.5 is a 3.5, there's a part of me that kind of wants to play it again, and a 3 is just like whatever. I'm happy to play it. I just don't feel the need to play it again. And once you start to move to 4, it's more positive. But a 3.5 is like, it's just not good enough, but I wish I had more time to play everything. And the reason I'm on the fence about Sea Salt and Pepper, I think I gave it a 3, but I'm not certain. I have to double check the video. The reason I'm on the fence is, mechanically speaking, Sea Salt and Pepper is a 3 for me, mechanically speaking. But it has charm, and the charm does push it up like half a notch. Like, it's borderline for me, so it might have been a 3.5. The review's there. Past that we have, lastly on Friday we had Junk Drawer. I really like Junk Drawer. Junk Drawer is excellent. I'm really enjoying it a lot. That one is, it's just so satisfying. It's polyominous, and it was not on my radar to like it nearly as much, but I really like Junk Drawer. Highly recommend checking that one out. My biggest complaint is I kind of want the grid to be larger. I want the grid to be like a 6x6 grid instead of a 5x5 grid. I think there's much more decision space in that, and so now I'm looking for a Junk Drawer Deluxe or Junk Drawer Big Box or Junk Drawer Extreme or whatever you want to call it. I don't really care, but I want a bigger version of Junk Drawer, but I am really loving that game. Which brings us to today. Today we have a few things going up. We have a review for Explorers going up from Ravensburger, as well as a review for Resist from Sea Salt and Pepper. That's funny. Sea Salt and Paper is a game from Pandasaurus Games. Resist is a game coming to you from the company Sea Salt and Pepper. different things. And then later this week, next week, we're going to have a few things going up. We're going to have a video on content creators. Why do content creators burn out so much? This was inspired by a post in Board Game Reviewers and Media, a Facebook group. I go through it, talk about things. I think it's an interesting video, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's not in any way meant to be a self-pity video in the slightest, but it is a post about the reality of what it is to be a content creator, and I think I'm one of the fortunate ones in that space. And so, just to be clear, fortunate means I think I have it easier in the sense that I have enough of you, frankly, that I'm grateful for, enough of you watching that the positive feedback loop of continue to make content is present, and it's not something everyone benefits from. But either way, that's going to be a video that's going to be coming out. I highly recommend watching that. Then we're going to have top 10 solo games, which is I'm overdue for, as well as a review. I haven't done a top 10 solo games in like 3 years now, so I want to redo it. And then we also have a review for Cretaceous Rails, as well as other reviews, but I really enjoyed Cretaceous Rails, so I want to highlight that as a review for an upcoming Kickstarter game that will be coming out this week. And then, lastly, we have the games on the table. Games on the table, as usual, these are games I hope to be diving into this week. I hope to be playing Sweet Best tonight, actually, so we'll see if that happens. Leaf, I had a chance to demo this at Gamma, and really intrigued by it. Want to dive into it. I think it's light, simple, easy, and breezy. We have Horrified over here, which Horrified, the Greek monsters. I played the original Horrified. Never played the middle one, whatever it's called. American Monsters, maybe? I don't know. But I'm very interested in diving into Greek monsters. I think this is very much my jam in terms of thematically. I think this is the most appeals to me. I always enjoyed Horrified. One of the first reviews I did on the channel, actually. One of the very first reviews on the channel was Horrified. And then we have Dragon Eclipse, which the box might be a bit damaged, but hope to be diving into Dragon Eclipse as well from Awakened Realms. That's going to be launching in like 2.5 weeks, and I need to play it. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.